Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen wa salatu wa salam ala khataman nabi wal mursaleen. Welcome to the 8th lecture in Istac-Iium lecture series on the future of knowledge and civilizational development. Our topic today is Islamic creative writing, and our speaker is Professor Faridah Abdul Manaf, who is an expert on literature and literary writing. When we are talking about literary writing, let me make some remarks before we start, that it has two aspects. One is expression, human expression through writing, and other is expression through the word, through the word, or symbolic expression. And in terms of Islam, the Quran begins with the word attaches writing with kalam and kalam. Kalam and kalam, kalam being the pen. And this appears very early in the Quran, when in Surah Al-Alaq, when it says, Allama bil kalam, allama al-insana ma lam ya'lam. So it teaches us that human does not know or does not have enough knowledge, and knowledge is sourced in the word, which is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is the source of knowledge. So when we seek ilm, we are seeking knowledge or science of understanding, for knowing and being guided about what is ma'ruf and what is munkar. And this is tied again with hikmah, wisdom, which is expressed in Surah Al-Jumu'ah. So the word reading, writing, expression is a part of Islamic approach to knowledge. This reminds me of the famous book by Franz Rosenthal titled Knowledge Triumphant, where he says Islam is the only religion which triumphs knowledge. And the prophets in the pre-Hijrah Islam era were also referring to the books, and they received revelations before the Quran, which is the final revelation which appeared to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. One point I want to make here before I introduce the speaker for today is that the distinction between, from the perspective of history of religion and phenomenology of religion, the distinction between the human being, and the animals is language. So language has a very important facility of felicity which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has provided to the human being. And all religions are rooted in language. And language becomes a source of a very important source of knowledge, seeking knowledge, and also for the future of knowledge. It is our honor to have Professor Faridah Abdul Manaf as our speaker today, and the topic is Islamic creative writing. Let me give a brief introduction to Professor Faridah Abdul Manaf. She received her BA Honours in English from University of Waikato in New Zealand, MA in English from University of Liverpool in the United Kingdom, and her PhD in New Literatures in English from Flinders University in South Australia. She was also a Fulbright Scholar at Cornell University in New York in 2007, and a recipient of the Maulana Scholar Program, and a brief stint of teaching at Seljuk University in Konya in 2018, the city of Rumi. Professor Faridah has been teaching Islamic literature at IIUM for 32 years. She is widely published in the areas of English literature, Islam, and has written articles on environment in local newspapers. Professor Faridah is also the Vice President of Iman, and an NGO of Muslim women professionals, which is active in interfaith and cross-cultural relations, and has been involved in organizing conferences in this area. She has also organized and co-organized environment-related events both at IIUM and also in Kota Damansara, where she lives. About her publications, she has published, she's a bilingual creative writer who has won some writing awards in Malaysia. Her poetry books are titled The Art of Naming, A Muslim Woman's Journey, and another one is Travel Poetry, which were published in 2006 and 2019, respectively. Her latest book, in 2022, is Wanita Rawa Terakir, which is her first historical novella. Professor Faridah has a certificate in fiction writing from the Oxford's Department of Continuing Education and has spoken on Islamic creative writing in many literary seminars. With this, I welcome Professor Nur Faridah to make her presentation. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, Prof. It's good to see you again, although virtually. And assalamu alaikum to everybody who's present. Thank you for being here. Now, my talk will take about an hour or slightly less than that. And I would like to have, extra time, perhaps 30 minutes to 40 minutes for discussion. Because what I do in my paper is like throw in a lot of ideas, actually. It's not really in depth per idea, but I throw in a lot of issues which I think are very important for us as Ummah to discuss pertaining to Islamic creative writing. Islamic creative writing itself as a genre is a new thing. It's a 20th century phenomenon because in the past, in the Islamic world, we don't call it Islamic writing, just call it by form, by genre, poetry or letter writing and so on and so forth, oratory and so on. So we'll get into that. I need Muzammil to show the PowerPoint that I have because I don't think I can share it from where I am. Muzammil, can you start showing my PowerPoint? Is it there?
Yeah, he's here. The Muzammil.
Otherwise, I don't think I can share screen because it's how do I do it? Because it says one participant can share at a time.
You can go to share screen as.
Then okay.
Okay.
Muzammil?
Okay.
Can you see the? All right.
Yeah, we can see it now.
So So I think the focus of this talk is this. I'm going to discuss the position of creative writing, Islamic creative writing, faith-based, writing itself, and its correlation with reading culture in Islam. And then perhaps you can compare it to what's happening in the West, Western thought itself on creative writing. But I would also like to tie it to definition of Islamic literature. I think they are closely related. You cannot, the production of your creative pieces, Islamic creative pieces, will be definitely Islamic literature. So we need to look at the definition of Islamic literature. For me, creative writing is the application. When we do literature, when we study literature, whether it's English or whatever, we actually analyze other people's work. But when you do creative writing, you are the center, you are the producer, you are the maker. So that's the difference. For me, when I teach creative writing, students learn more about literature better than when they analyze other people's work. Because it's hands-on. You learn about how to use literary devices and so on and so forth. So Muzammil, can you go to slide 2 dulu? Can you press 2? Because I can't control it from here. Susah lah, very difficult. Let me check if I can. Muzammil? Hello? Otherwise, I will speak, yeah, from my slide over here because it doesn't seem to move.
Yeah.
Hold on a minute. Right. Now I'm confused. Which one is Muzammil and which is mine? Okay, next one, Muzammil. Slide, the next slide, please.
Okay. No, you need to go to the second slide up there.
Gosh.
Okay. Focus on the top. Okay.
Slide number 3. So this is like, okay, slide number 3 is this, yeah. In the West, this creative writing is always seen as a skill, right, to help express yourself and also to capture or to reflect on the complexity of life. As an academic program, you are introduced to various genre and form, yeah, from poetry to fiction, and fiction means novel, short story, scripts. Scripts can be writing for the stage, for radio, screenplay, writing for film. And they're all different, they have all different techniques, right? With screenplays now they've got apps and so on. So it's easier to write your screenplay because all you have to do is just fill in the blanks, you know, the structure and format are already designed for you. It's easier. Now, there's also creative nonfiction, which means, go back, Zamir. Alamak. All right. Which means memoir, literary journalism, travel writing, diary, food writing, personal essays, and so on. Anything which is not fiction. Now, in this writing, in creative writing, ironically, you need critical thinking skill more than reflective writing. Yeah, because it's just not about writing what you see, writing about your emotion, but sometimes, you know, you're dealing with issues as well. Now, the use of artistic expression is very important. It has to be drawn on imagination. So imagination is also key when you do creative writing. But you use it to communicate meaning, and you use all those literary devices, imagery, drama, narrative. So there are ways. And people say, oh, can you teach creative writing? Yes, you can. Yeah. Otherwise, it'll be quite difficult because when you go into competition, writing competition, you will also be assessed. So there will be tools to assess it. We'll go into that. Yeah, but basically, there's no right and wrong in creative writing in the West. You don't talk about values. I mean, you talk about values, but it's not key. You don't talk about divinity because it's not key. So anything goes. In the West now, if you want to talk about your sexual preference, your LGBT thing, you can. It's encouraged, right? So this is when I bring in the term Islamic creative writing, because we set borders. We need to set borders. Otherwise, anything goes. But I want you to point out to a work done in 2005, which is still spoken about. I was just watching YouTube on this morning, 2022, by Professor James English. He wrote this book, which won the best academic book of the year. The Economy of Prestige, Prizes, Awards, and Circulation of Cultural Values, which goes to affirm my argument that, you know, it's not a free ride, you know, that there are agendas, there are biases in creative writing. So Professor English raised this issue in prizes and awards and circulation of cultural value when he talks about literary prizes in the West. Yeah, when people award prizes, when you win literary prizes, it has its own what you call agenda. It has its own bias and it has its own manipulation and exploitation, although English doesn't mention those. But it raises the question of who set the tastemaker. He writes about tastemaker. When writers win, judges, jurors have their own preferences. Yeah. So it's just like you send your work to a certain publishing house, they have their own values and tastes. Like if you send your work to feminist press, anything that is against feminism, don't expect it to be promoted, it to be published, and so on and so forth. So, when I say there's no right and wrong in creative writing, it has, you have to see it from that perspective as well, and I would recommend you to look up James English work, and he's on YouTube as well. He was just invited by Nebraska School of Humanities to speak on this recently, 2020. And he's also, his new book is on beauty of numbers, talking about ranking of courses, I think. Yeah. So that's something for you to look at as well. Next slide, please. All right, next. Okay. I think I need to go into my own okay, I'm going to speak from my own can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'm going to speak from my own slide here because I don't see how yours is moving over there. So I'm going to start with Quran chapter 26. Yeah, Ashwara, verses 224 to 227, in which this ayah came in when one of the Prophet's favorite poets gave up. He said, I'm not going to deal with poetry anymore if it means it's going against the religion. So he gave up. But the Prophet loved him so much, right? Then the ayah came in and came in to remind the difference between good poets and bad poets. And it reads as such, Ashwara. Can you see that on your slide?
Yes.
All right. Yeah. Verse 2 to 4. As for poets...
Yes, we can see.
All right. As for poets, they are followed merely by deviants. Do you not see how they ran in every field, only saying what they never do? Except those who believe, do good, remember Allah often, and poetically avenge the believers after being wrongfully slandered. The wrongdoers will come to know what evil end they will meet. So this is, for me, I use this as a guidance. Good poetry and bad poetry in Islamic creative writing would be this. If it brings you closer to Allah, if it brings you to transform your life from bad to good, then it's worth looking into. But content is not everything, right? So what is the definition of Islamic creative writing? As I said earlier, it's closely associated with Islamic literature because what you produce becomes Islamic literature. And Islamic literature, in a modern sense, came with Islamic reform of Said Qutb. For those who are not into this, Said Ibrahim Hussein Qutb, born 1906 to 1966, was an Egyptian author, Islamic scholar, educator, theorist, revolutionary poet, leading member of Ikhwanul Muslimin in the 50s and 60s. He was influenced by Hassan al-Banna Maududi, Ibn Taymiyyah. Basically, he sought to re-establish truly Islamic values in Muslim societies that were becoming more and more westernized and taking us away from the religion. Yeah. So much of his ideas influenced his younger brother, Muhammad Qutb, who moved to Saudi Arabia after the brother's execution, yeah, by Egyptian government. We'll go into Qutb's ideas, Muhammad Qutb's idea on literature, but I need to go to the earlier writers, yeah, past Muslim scholars and philosophers who were, for me, Islamic creative writers, if not critics. Sometimes you have to do both, yeah. If you write, you also need to be a good critic. And I'm going to look at Farabi, Ibn Sina, and Al-Ghazali briefly because I haven't really delved into them fully, but I hope those who are present here, who are just thinking about writing their thesis and so on, you know, please look into Muslim classical scholars if you are doing literature or even language or linguistics or music. These are fine thoughts, yeah. Farabi, as you well know, for those who study him, is much influenced by Aristotle. Muzamil, I think you have to go to the next slide because I'm reading from the next slide. Yeah, next. Yeah. So here, yeah, much of his works on Aristotle's on logic and related subjects are still around, available in Western translations. I mean, I saw a book once, yeah, you showed me, Prof, on Farabi, published by one of the universities in the US. You know, they go all out on classical Muslim writers. And yet, I think we are not doing enough in IIUM, yeah, except for perhaps Al-Ghazali. But Farabi, Ibn Sina, I think there's much more. Farabi, in his studies of the roles of language in human life and society, sees it as language to convey. The use of language is to convey information, to ask questions, to resolve disagreements. Language, in some sense, copies meaning. Any mismatches between language and meaning must be avoided. He has written a lot of books on language and verbal art, for example, the book on the art of writing, the book of verse and rhetoric, on letters and pronunciation, book on calligraphies, book on dictionaries. He divides art into two. One is to have a great art. By that he meant philosophies, yeah, wisdom, knowledge, intellectual wit. The other is to be useful. And this is what I think the role of Islamic creative writing should be. When people read you, you should be able to help them to transform their life and so on and so forth. You know, with Farabi, he put a stress on form structure. Content is also important. By that, you know, philosophy, knowledge, opinion, wisdom. And he also stressed, because, you know, he wrote a book on theory of music, yeah? One of the first book on music, harmony of sound, rhythm, yeah? So if you're thinking about writing, have this at the back of the mind, the harmony of this, yeah? Following Farabi's framework. It has to be there. You must give, you must give importance to philosophy, yeah, structure, form, beauty of it, yeah, harmony of sound if you're writing poetry, and so on and so forth. I sometimes sit on judging panel, yeah, judging literary prizes. Sometimes I don't see this, yeah, in the work. You may have the language, you may have the philosophy, you don't have the structure, or you have all those things but no philosophy. So, you know, it doesn't read well. Looking at the next classical writer, Ibn Sina. Next slide, yeah, Muzamil. We know him as the medical guy. You know, we know him for his book Al-Qanun fi Al-Tib, the canon of medicine. But the late Professor Rabi El Said Abdulhamid, yeah, from Al-Faiza University, passed away in 2015, unfortunately, wrote an article, The Role of Ibn Sina's Medical Poem in the Transmission of Medical Knowledge to Medieval Europe. Remember what Farabi said, you write to convey information, right? So I think Ibn Sina is doing this here. He's also very much influenced by Farabi. Yeah? So he wrote this poem, 1,326 verses on medicine, were his poetic summary of the encyclopedic textbook, the Canon of Medicine. Why did he do this? Yeah, it's to make his knowledge on the topic accessible. Yeah, and Ibn Sina was a talented and prolific poet, yeah, covering different genres and niches. And in his work, there's always the show of unity of science, religious belief, and spiritual knowledge. Yeah, and I will show you an example of his. I think at the bottom of the page, you will see a brief translated poem from his Avicenna's poem on medicine, translated by Kruger in 1963. In defining medicine, he wrote this. Yeah, what is the definition of medicine? And he wrote this. Medicine is the preservation of health and the cure of disease, which arises from conscious causes which exist within the body. I'm sure in Arabic, the rhythm will be preserved, yeah, but this is translated. But the idea is he's showing us the meaning of medicine, but also teaching us how to take care of our health, and also perhaps teaching scientists about what the causes of illnesses, of disease that actually exist within the body. So in that one line is everything, right? So poetry simplify something which could be very, very complicated. In fact, in pre-colonial days in Africa, knowledge was conveyed in verse, not prose. Knowledge on navigation, knowledge on biology, knowledge on geography, they were all written in verse. It's only after colonization came in, we've got textbooks, yeah, in prose and so on. Now, Ibn Sina didn't just write about medicine. He was also writing Sufi pieces, yeah, in Epistle of the Bird, which later on influenced Al-Ghazali, Faridah, writing on the same subject. And I happened to study this when I was doing my sabbatical at Istac. Yeah? And if you're familiar with Al-Ghazali's work, Fariuddin Attah's Mantiqut Time, it actually, you know, the origins of it is actually, I'm sure it's from Greek, but when it got to Ibn Sina, he transformed it into Sufic writing. It talks about the journey of the self approaching God, yeah, and we are tested by trials and tribulation in this journey, going through this group of birds, going through 7 valleys, yeah, tested by all sorts of challenges, wealth, sickness, and so on. But in Ibn Sina, when whatever's left, because some of them just drop out, they fail in their test, but whoever's left, at the end of the journey were automatically accepted, yeah, into that realm of Jannah, yeah, in Ibn Sina. But when Al-Ghazali wrote it, it's not automatic, because his philosophy is only Allah knows, yeah, who it doesn't mean that if you do everything, yeah, or good deeds and everything that you need to do as a good Muslim, it's only by grace of Allah that you are accepted in Jannah. So this was the message of Al-Ghazali when he wrote his bird story, his Sufi bird journey. In Fariuddin Attar, I think it was closer to Ibn Sina, although I've seen animated interpretation of Attar's Matikotail. It's closer to Ghazali's interpretation, that it's only by grace of Allah that you are accepted in the realm of God. Are you with me? Can you follow me?
Yes, yes.
All right. Okay. So what I'm saying here is the need to go back to past practice of Muslim classical scholars as a guide, because in the modern world, when we do literature and all that, we are so dependent on Western literary theories, and they are devoid of anything divine. Yeah, God is not the center. God is there, says one of the Western literary theories. Yeah, Roland Barthes, the death of the author, but God is also there. Yeah, in many of them, it's no longer the center. So sometimes I feel at home using the theoretical frame, using the philosophical thought of past Muslim scholars as my theoretical framework when I deal with creative writing, right? Why do we do this? What's the end goal? Why do we write? Who do we write for? All this comes into question. Next, Al-Ghazali, I think Istac is so well versed with Al-Ghazali's thought, yeah, and you will know that he used literature for da'wah, yeah, on two levels. One is to employ high-end literary models to serve the Islamic thought and belief, like we have seen how Farabi and Ibn Sina used it, and the second is to choose beautiful literary style of expression, of expressive and creative writing. And this was recently discussed in Al Jazeera, the two-level use of literature. And I think you will find, I will go into that also later on. Faruqi saying that the end goal of writing is da'wah. Yeah, I hold on to that. The end goal of writing, the end goal of learning, the end goal of knowledge is da'wah. Yeah, and we tend to forget this. The da'wah bit. And I was reading a book, yeah, by one of our local writers, and he attributed this to Al-Ghazali, but I was asking around. I haven't found the source, but it's beautiful. If you cannot be king or ulama, be a writer. Wow. I love that. Definitely, we cannot be king or ulama, but we can be a writer. But as powerful, probably. So in Al-Ghazali, if this is really from him, if anybody could find out the source, yeah, his goal in life, as seen by him, is to abide teachings of religion to ensure salvation and happiness in the hereafter. And this Farabi also speaks on happiness a lot, yeah. And I think one of my students is writing a thesis on concept of happiness in Shakespeare, and he compares this with how Muslim scholars look at concept of happiness, and he happened to look at Al-Atas definition of happiness. So that's quite interesting also, concept of happiness in life as seen in literature, and also as discussed by philosophers both in East and West. Now, Al-Ghazali, one example of his poem is this. Yeah, it was found in his deathbed, and it's also entitled Deathbed Poem, translated by Martin Nings. And this one, I think, is this one was taken from Islamic Text Society. Yeah. Say unto brethren when they see me dead, and weep for me, lamenting me in sadness. Think ye I am this called year to bury? I swear by God, this dead one is not I. I in the spirit am, and this is my body, and this my body. My dwelling was my garment for a time. I'm a treasure, hidden I was beneath his talisman of dust, wherein I suffered. I'm a pearl, a shell imprisoned me, but leaving it, all tries I have left. I'm a bird, and this was once my cage, but I have flown, leaving it as a token. I praise God who has set me free and made for me a dwelling in the heavenly heights. Ere now I was a dead man in your midst, but I have come to life and doff my shroud. Quoted from the Islamic Text Society. You will find that Al-Ghazali in Tahafud al-Falasifa, the incoherence of the philosophers, he argued that those who denied resurrection of the body were infidel. So if you're teaching this poetry, you can bring in the argument of body, soul, what is body, what are his thoughts on this, what are the other Muslim classical scholars' thoughts on this, what are the Western thoughts on this. Yeah, so a lot of literature on this, a lot of argument. Even when I was studying English medieval literature, which borrowed a lot from Muslim ideas on this, we spoke about this as well. So I think, you don't just look at content, but you look at philosophy of the day, philosophy of the old, and so on and so forth. So that here I think he brings to our attention about the status of soul, whether it's immortal, whether it's permanent, whether when you are resurrected, whether you come with full body and soul and so on. But I think it also brings you to the awareness that we should not be trapped, by the worldly things, by the earthly things. Right now, looking at more current scholars, and their thoughts on Islamic literature, we go back to Muhammad Qutb, the younger brother of Said Qutb. He was born in Musha, Egypt, 1919, died quite recent, 2014, in Mecca, Saudi. He stressed a lot on emotion and feeling, not just the importance of idea or philosophy, when doing Islamic literature. Now, this thing on emotion is very important. I don't think we have enough study on this, whether by not that I know, maybe I'm not aware, maybe there is, by Muslim psychologists and philosophers on emotion. When I was studying, when I first started as a literature student in my undergraduate years, and I, mingle with others who don't do literature, they would look down on us, saying, you emotional being, because doing literature is all emotion, poetry, emotion, novel, emotion, tragedies, emotion. So they look down on this. I was thinking, like, why? What makes us human is our emotion. What makes us intelligent is our emotion. In fact, I think in Greek philosophy, emotion is seen as the highest form of the highest form of intelligence. You know what? Even animals have emotion, right? When animals show emotions, you say, "Wow, that's intelligent." The dog is intelligent. The elephant is intelligent because it shows emotion. And when people don't show emotion, you will say that person is worse than animal, right? So why must you look down on emotion? And in creative writing, incorporating emotion in feelings is very key. How do you move your audience to feel, to think, if not by emotion? If they don't feel sad when your main character is sad or angry or frustrated or joyful, you know, your writing has no meaning. The same with filmmaking. If your film failed to move the audience when it's supposed to be funny and people don't laugh, that's tragic, right? So Kutub stressed a lot on emotion and feeling. Yeah, philosophy is important, you know, that's key also. There must be substance in your writing. The form must be there. But he also feels that art must connect nature with mankind. Yeah, art must connect nature, mankind with the creator. So the creator is still center. I think most of our classical scholars say this, past and present, you will see. Must connect to the teaching of Al-Quran as source of reference. We don't want to be preaching like, okay, you leave, you know, hadith or Quranic verses here and there in your creative writing. No, I don't mean that. But the gist, the understanding, the internalization of our religion must be there. The good values, right? But you have to understand the history of literature in Islam. You know, if you fail to understand history of anything, you cannot add new thing, right? So literature in Islam actually evolved from the term al-adab, which was initially associated with ethics, moral, good behavior, and good relations with one another. Often it ties to invitation to eating and drinking. No wonder, yeah? In our Muslim home, when you receive a guest, the first thing you ask is like, come in, can I serve you a glass of water or drinking? If you don't do that, your guest will say, oh, that guy is rude, has no manners, right? It always ties to that. Adab. Adab means eating and drinking as well. How nice. Now, later it evolved to include forms of writing and speaking, yeah, which include prose, poetry, oratory, letter writing. What you see in the West is there, except that oratory is not that fashionable anymore today. Yeah, the rest, I think, letter writing as well, but it's slowly coming back. That's Kutub. Now, more recent, Ismail Al-Faruqi on Islamic art. Yeah, most of you who are doing Islamization of knowledge will be, especially under tutelage of Professor Imtiaz, you'll be well versed with his philosophy and thought. Yeah, Tawheed is very key. Unity of God, as with other scholars. Yeah, for him, is the principle of beauty inherent in Islamic art. For him, Islamic art is Quranic art. Must be based on Quran, in color, in line, in movement, in shape, and in sound. Yeah, this was recently argued by Dua Al-Ashari 2021, citing Faruqi in 1986. He divided Islamic artistic forms into 5 sections: arts of literature, yeah, poetry, prose, proverbs, etc. Arts of Arabic calligraphy of all forms, yeah, arts of plant and engineering decoration, spatial arts to do with building engineering, architecture, and gardens, sound engineering, and finally reciting the Quran. Yeah, religious songs in praise of the Prophet, in praise of Allah, remembrance, zikrullah, singing, music, nasheed, and so on and so forth.
Need to change the slide. Need to change it. Brother Muzammil, need to change the slide.
Next. Ismail Faruqi.
Go to next slide.
Next. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
The goal of Islamic art in Faruqi is to emphasize the monotheistic interconnections between religion and art. But we have seen this. It's the same, right? He echoes past scholars. There has to be interconnections between religion and art. This is why it's so important for me to have that label, Islamic creative art. Although I was challenged earlier in my earlier talk by someone, art, creativity is creativity, art is art. Why do you need to bring in all these labels? But this is it. If you don't put that, you won't see the need of having that interconnections between religion and art, right? Quran for Faruqi is the center, in its structure, as I said earlier, influence and meaning. Arabesque is central, in Islamic art, and I think we had a discussion on this, Prof. Imtiaz, how some scholars disagree with him, probably we can bring that back into discussion later on. Next year, Zamir. Yeah, in Malaysia, coming closer to home, there has been a lot of movements to define, to bring in, to indigenize, if you like, local framework, literature to synergize literature with Islamic framework. And I think it was popularized. It was probably brought earlier, but not noticed by Najib Alatas. But when Shannon Ahmad brought in his theory, Sastra Islam, everybody stood up and took notice, because he wrote a book called Shit and said it's Islamic. So there's a lot of hoo-has about how can it be Islamic when you use the dirty word shit, right? And a lot of discussion. So he popularized it for me. And then you've got Muhammad Afandi Hassan, Surat Melayu Baru. Shafi'i Abu Bakar, his theory on Takmila. Najib Alatas, Faham Sastra Islami. Syed Osman, Syed Omar, Kritika Melayu. Hashim Awang, Pengkaedahan Melayu. Our own Professor Kamal Hassan with Gagasan Sastra Islam. Usman Al-Muhammadi with Gagasan Sastra Melayu Islami. I think if you need to know more of this, you can contact Dr. Asma, who is in Department of Arabic Language and Literature, because she and Safira, I think, wrote an article on this, in 2019, and quoting Al-Muhammadi thought on Gagasan Sastra Melayu Islami, whereby he was seen as he's demonstrated as stressing on the purification of the heart. For Al-Mahdi, you need to purify the heart, the mind, especially of the material world, of the nafs. Writers themselves must have sincerity, taqwa, and close relationship with Allah. It makes sense, because you cannot produce anything Islamic if you yourself are not Islamic, right? So in our analysis of literature by Muslim writers or writers with Muslim heritage, we look into this. We look at the author. We don't agree with Roland Barthes when he said death of the author. Author is not important. The text is important. No. For me, authors are very important. You have to look at the author, lifestyle, philosophy, and then you look at the literature. So I'm with Al-Muhammadi here. But he stresses on traditional form. Message can be universal. By traditional form, I suppose what you see, what is accepted, conventional in your literary, in your local literature. I don't think he wants to move away from other than what is accepted, yeah, by people of the culture. So I would say that the essence of all these Islamic literary frameworks are on purity of thoughts, yeah, based on Tawhidi framework. Again, yeah, to justify this, why do we need Islamic creative writing? Why is the term important? For me, again, labels are important. They define you. They set the borders. You know, for me, you don't have time to read everything, but if there's a corner in a bookshop saying Islamic literature, Islamic creative writing, I would just, you know, I probably have half a day, yeah, to spend in a city. So if I visit a bookshop, I would just zoom there. So labels are important, right? What then it goes back to why do we need to write? Why write? You know, why bother to write? You know, a lot of we churn out PhDs year in, year out, or scholars, but how many of them write? Yeah, I don't mean just textbooks, but creative writing for da'wah purpose, for information purpose. Words are mightier than swords. You know, for a long time, I thought this was a hadith. Yeah, but upon checking, it's not. Yeah, this actually, I thought the phrase "the pen is mightier than the sword" was hadith. It's not. It's actually originated from a British novelist and playwright, Edward Hoover Lytton, in 1839, where he first wrote, "The pen is mightier than the sword." But this idea, actually, if you trace back to an Assyrian saying, yeah, found in the teaching of Al-Higga, this is a learned Jew guy, a Jew guy, yeah, 5 BC. He's a good moral guy, a Jew. He was the first one who said, words are mightier than swords. And upon checking hadith by Imam Ahmad, number 6980, I found this. Yeah, thanks to Dr. Adli who helped me trace this. Abdullah ibn Amr reported, the Messenger of Allah, peace and blessing be upon him, said, there will be a tribulation that will wipe out the Arabs, in which those killed on both sides are in hell. In that time, the spoken word will be stronger than the sword. But this hadith was in relation to remind people on the danger of fitna. It's not to promote that writing is more important or speaking is more important than fighting, you know. But this is something else. But I bring this into discussion to also alert you of the change of the importance of the spoken word to the written. In the earlier religions, Judaism and Islam, the spoken word, in fact, the first word, read, it's not write. Spoken word is important. Yeah. So if any of you are linguists in this room, you may want to look at the current work, yeah, current written language bias in linguistics. In fact, in our academia, in universities, it's the written word. Our exams are written. Yeah, I think it's like 60-40. How much of that is based on the spoken word? Your presentation, how many percentage? But the rest are exam written form. Yeah, so we are judged based on our writing. So there's a bias. There's a written language bias, and I'm glad there's a book on this, very detailed, but it's an old book, 1982, per Linnell, The Written Language Bias in Linguistics. You may want to have a look at it. But my point is, in Islamic creative writing, we do both. You write and you talk about what you write. And I think it goes the same with in the West. When writers promote their book, they go on a tour, yeah, and they talk about their writing. So I think the advantage of written work is that it will last longer, even after you're dead, and it will reach out more people. But in today's digital world, where you've got TikTok, you've got YouTube, the spoken is still, I think it's more effective than writing today, because people don't have time to read. People listen. Look at the Da'wah done, yeah, by our ulamas on YouTube. Lots of followers. It's the spoken word. So you may want to podcast your creative writing instead of writing. You may want to podcast your writing, yeah, your writing, your work, your creative thinking. Faith-based writing is not new. You know, your Christian writers have Christian novel, Christian short story, and so on. But I have hope. I was hoping that my presentation, by outlining philosophies of Islamic purpose of writing, will give some kind of direction for those who are interested in doing creative writing Islamically. It has to be purposeful. It has to reflect, incorporate teachings of writing the Sunnah as the ultimate guidance, yeah, in molding our creativity. The final destination is to enlighten, as Faruqi was saying. The end goal of knowledge is da'wah. Yeah, the final destination is to enlighten, to inspire our readers to be closer to Allah, to be good people, to be good servants of Allah, beneficial to other beings. Islamic creative writing should offer hope to the hopeless, offer joy to the joyless. Qutb and Al-Mahdi do not reject use of literary devices. They don't reject aesthetic beauty. Faruqi also, he stressed on form and design, although he also stressed on taqwa. Allah loves beauty, so there's no reason for you not to engage in beauty as you write, right? For me, Islamic creative writing is to keep writers on track so that they don't lose sight of the mission of why they write, to what end and to what purpose. So it is very important to understand mission of life, purpose of existence, so that our purpose as writers, as authors, would also be clear. It is, as I said, important to understand the philosophy, the history of writing in Islam before we say, hey, we innovate, we have something new here. But that something new has no value in the eyes of Allah. Right? So why is Islamic creative writing important? Important to whom? For me, to Muslims, to the rest of the world. Alhamdulillah, if they want to read our work, but sometimes when they see the word Islam, they say, this is dogmatic. Yeah, but Alhamdulillah, I have written two work, two collection of poetry, The Art of Naming Muslim Journeys, a Muslim Woman's Journey, and also travel writing. They are well received, Alhamdulillah, because when I travel, I bring my work, I talk at conferences, well received by non-Muslims. In fact, they find it refreshing to talk about Faridah Attar, for example, Mantiko Tair, about the journey and so on. So especially for young Muslims, it's very important, because as the world becomes more lonely, they were saying this is the age of lonely, because we live in isolation. We think that we are connected, through internet, through digital communication, but you'll find that our young people find it more and more difficult to express themselves in a healthy manner, that may help them understand themselves better. Writing is also a therapy. all these pent-up negative emotions can be unleashed through creative writing, yeah, as they deal with their challenges in life. But it is also important to have a well-trained Islamic creative writing teacher, yeah, to play his or her role in guiding the young writers. It is also important to encourage them to read, to think, the art of thinking critically, and allow them to express, yeah, how they wish, yeah, after giving the guideline on what is considered good writing in Islam, without impinging on artistic and creative forms and expression. I would not sideline this, yeah, the artistic and creative forms. Yeah, writing should be used as a means to spread knowledge, as Faridah was saying, to convey information. And I cannot leave without discussing this, the correlation between creative writing and reading culture. And I wish to highlight on this reading program in Morocco. As you know, the literacy rate is very poor in Morocco, especially for children under 15 years old. A special reading program was devised based on phonemic awareness, where students learn to create stories based on the sound of words they learn. Earlier, we spoke about the division between spoken and writing. Now we bring in listening, sound. Sound is very important in Islam. When we read Quran, sound, yeah, if you say it wrongly, there you go, yeah, you'll be corrected. So here, phonemic awareness is used as a foundation to teach reading and writing among young people. For example, rug, R-U-G, rug. You pronounce it, you say it, right? Rug. Then you take R, you put in H, hug, hug. So already you are bringing into their attention vocabulary, different sounds, different meaning. Yeah. So this is something that I would like to revisit also. I'm retiring, but this is something that I would like to go into. Yeah, great that also the next life. Right. To have a strong reading culture is vital for any nation. We know that, we know that this is important for us to develop and to prosper. Unfortunately, a quick check on reading habits in developing countries, especially dominantly populated by Muslims, does not give us a good impression. I look at Malaysia, I look at UAE, I look at Turkey, I look at Morocco. In general, people, especially young people, do not like to read. Malaysians, you may want to argue, oh, but we are number one when buying books. There is a difference, yeah, between buying books and reading books. Yes, our book fairs are always packed. Book fairs in Malaysia always packed. People will buy like thousands and thousands worth of ringgit buying books at book fairs. But recent studies show that buying books and reading is not the same. Sometimes people just want to look happening, like I'm reading, I've got lots of books, look at my room. It's just for show. Yeah? Looking at PISA results will sadden us further. Whether we agree with PISA or not, it is some kind of indication where we are, and that cannot be far from truth. In Turkey, an article written by Arzu Onel and Sule Pirat Dukoka 2021, citing PISA 2015, found the correlation between reading habits and achievement of high school students studying biology. It showed that half of Turkish students were not science literate. 1/3 did not have reading skill. I think we should take this seriously. Yeah, these numbers matter, right? And reading habit in UAE. Yeah, Dubai organizes Knowledge Summit yearly, and in 2016, they found that less than 15% first grade students were likely to graduate, were likely or not likely, were likely to graduate from high school. Reading was limited to textbooks and memorization. A lot could have taken place since then. Yeah, this is like 2016. I'm waiting for an update on this. But if this trend continues, UAE's wealth will not be able to sustain old talents, as old talents are not replaced by young local talents. In the end, the country will be run by others. The richness of one's country will be in the hands of others. Yeah. So before I leave, I would like you to consider these questions. What are our roles as teachers, as young scholars, as writers or future writers, to boost creative writing and reading culture in our localities? Have we found out why young ones, or even adults, why they dislike reading? Do we have enough interesting books to pique our interest, stimulate our imagination, drive us to love knowledge? Have we done enough translations of great writings from all over the world for our young to learn from? So how do we instill love for knowledge? Yeah, and encourage creative writing for the sake of Allah. Personally, have you yourself written creatively as a Muslim? I leave this question to be answered in our Q&A. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Faridah.
Yeah.
Very, very interesting. And you took me back in my memory to my class, my study days at Temple University, when I did a course with Ismail Al-Faruqi on Islam and art. And he talked about the sound of engineering, or Handasa Saut, and the contribution of his wife, Lois Lamia Al-Faruqi, also very much important in Islam and art when it comes to literature, architecture, calligraphy, painting, and all. And you also mentioned, I'm just going to say a few comments and then I'll go to the questions. You talked about the Malaysian contribution, Sastra Islam, and the Malaysian writers, and the philosophy of writing. And what is the end goal? The end goal is to do dawah, and we need training. And you ended up on a note, and which is very, very, very important, that we are losing the habit of writing. We are buying books. Before we used to photocopy. Now we download, but we don't read. And this is the state of affairs. So I go first directly to the questions I've received on the YouTube. Then I will go to the community here. There's a question here by Sally Shelley. She's asking, she or he is asking, who gets to set the agenda for Muslim literature? For example, Zaba's works used to be banned in some states for being non-Islamic. Who gets to decide what is right interpretation of Islam when it comes to be applied to creative writing?
Shazani,
Sally, no, this is from YouTube. Sally.
Is that the first question, right?
Yeah, this is the first question, yeah.
Is there something close to Islamic literature that resembles Tolkien's original story, spiritual, Lord of the Rings? I'm sure there is, because the problem with us is that language barrier. We don't read Persian, we don't read Turkish, we don't read Kurdish, we don't read whatever out there, So we rely on translation in the language that you know. I'm very limited, I only read Malay and English. So I think this is your task, Shazani. I think it's our duty. That's why I mentioned about the need of translation. In fact, I'm trying to propose to IIUM, there should be a translation center of great works in IIUM. Translate great works, Persia, whatever, not necessarily of the Muslim world, but basically I think we should start with Islamic world. That's lacking. Otherwise, we go back to the old days. We learn languages, the importance of learning more than one language. In the old days, our scholars have 8 languages. That's why they're so clever. Yeah, so clever. So I think this is it. You know, as I said, creative writing itself is something new. What more Islamic literature? What more Islamic creative writing? So there should be a specific program on this, and students should be encouraged to research on this. Right now, do I go to the next question, or are you going to read it?
Yeah, you go to the next question is from Romaiza. How's critical thinking versus reflective writing skills for Islamic creative writing compared to Western counterpart?
Yeah, she wants to know about this.
Yeah.
Yeah, reflective, I think it's based on your how you see the world. You're reflective without having that critical element. You just reflect, oh, you know, I went through this in my life, and I think blah blah blah. Reflective, you reflect on what's going on. But critical thinking is that you have to ask, why did it happen? Why did it happen to me? Where do I go from here? So I think there's a difference between that. In Western counterpart, that's I'm sure there's a bit of both, but I think the critical bit is always stressed, right? Good literature, I'm talking about good literature, right? They don't simply write. If you look at, I'm trying to, but that is a Chinese Nobel Prize winner. I was thinking of his work. I can't think of any Western counterpart. Yeah. But when you read an example of, okay, let's look, because I specialize in Shakespeare. Let's look at Shakespeare. When Shakespeare writes, it's just not to reflect the age of the period, but he was also a political commentator, a political critic. Yeah, he was also doing that against the monarch, against what's going on around the world. Christopher Marlowe, for example, as well, commenting on global events. So critical thinking, that's why when you do literature, when you analyze as critics, we apply that a lot. Yeah, and we use that through literary criticism. This is where the problem comes in, because Western literary criticism is devoid of the spirituality as we know it, the Islamic spirituality. So when you apply, for example, feminist criticism, when you read a text, yeah, when you read role of women in Shakespeare, for example, and you read it, I think it's very difficult to apply the Islamic concept of feminism in Shakespeare, because you have to come up with your own literary framework for that. And we are doing this in my department. You know, we try to come up with our own Islamic framework when we read our text. So when we read, for example, I have a thesis on Robert Browning, 18th century poet, and his concept of man, concept of free will, and all that, bringing in Ibn Sina's ideas on this, for example. So then it makes sense, you know, it It makes you understand life better, existence better, and also the duality of both framework. You know, reading a Western text with Islamic framework is very enriching. Yeah. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, there's a question going to be asked by Brother Abdulhamid from UK. He's in London, from Islamic Literary Society. He's going to ask you directly. So, Brother Hai, please. Abdulhamid.
Dr. Professor Noor, Jazakumullah for your interesting and insightful lecture. My question is with regards to labeling. You said that label is important because it identifies your culture and you're able to narrow down what it is. Now, when you label it, does, from Islamic perspective, does that only is defined by orthodox worldview of Islam, or does it expand to other sect and group? Because you mentioned Farabi and you mentioned Ibn Sina, who may not by many be considered within the of orthodoxy. So if you include their poetry, are you not diluting your definition of Islamic creative writing? Because they're not considered by many theologians to be within the domain of
Right. Yeah. Okay, I can understand your question in the written form, but when you speak, my computer, the speaker is not that good. But I hope I'm able to get the gist of your question. Fiction is part of creative writing? Yes, by Western standard it is. But if you look at the past, well, it's something new. As I said, it evolved. Yeah, creative writing is a new phenomenon. But I could see how, looking at works in the past, especially in Malaysia, when I see judging fiction writing by Muslim writers, when they have what I have highlighted earlier, the role of the writer, fiction, philosophy and all that incorporated in your writing as fiction, it works. It brings you've got this feeling that you are actually reading a secondary sources of understanding hadith of Quran, but in a fun way, in a creative way. Take, for example, one work, this writer writing about this magician, and this he's very poor. So one day he was but actually I shouldn't be talking about this because I'm still judging the work. Maybe I shouldn't. But at the end of it, it shows you like values, good values, what Muslims should do to help other people, because that's what we are taught. So you can do that, it has been done. It has been done, has been proven. That's why we've got all these critics, the Malaysian critics that I mentioned earlier, coming out with theoretical framework. Because before, in analyzing this Islamic writing, they couldn't find anything that fits. So they come up with their literary framework. So that with that mold, they can say, this work is Islamic because it's got all the elements, the taqwa, the purity of the language, good characters, and so on, the beauty of it, So it's done, it's accepted. And that's what I'm trying to promote. More and more educated Muslims should be writing, whether poetry or short story or fiction. And there has been, right? Especially in London. There's one lady who reverted English folktale into Islamic, Cinderella story becoming accepted, accommodative to Islamic thought. Right? I hope that answers the question.
Yeah. The other question is, what is the position of fiction writing in Islamic literary work?
I think I've answered that, right?
Yeah, I think you have answered that already. And then comes a question from Professor Faridah Jamal. Can you say something about Rumi's Masnavi, poetry, writing of poetry as creative writing?
Right. I love it. Although I'm not an expert on this, but this is also Islamic literature. I mean, we study him in our department. We've got a course called Islamic literature. So we do Rumi, we do other writers of that region. So we need to produce more work like this. Yeah, Faridah Jamal, are you the poet? You're not. Are you a
Yeah.
poet?
Hello, Assalamu alaikum, Prof.
Alaikum salam. Are you the poet?
The poet?
Do you write poetry? Because once
I did. I do write poetry, but I'm basically a microbiologist. And
I think I look at your work, right? You have published, right?
yes, I have.
Your poetry work. I think at one point I did study your work, but it was a long time ago.
Yeah, but I published something else in 2020, and that's where I got your book at Silverfish. I have it. I really like it.
Right.
The book on traveling. I love
So
that
where
book.
are you now? Are you based in Malaysia? Or are you?
No, I'm Malaysian. I've always lived here. I retired from UKM, and now I'm teaching part-time in UM, but that doesn't really matter. Actually, somebody from Istac has translated Rumi's Masnavi, and I knew
Ajman. Yeah.
He translated all the volumes. It was launched, and it's. I think it's an amazing book. He translated into Malay. I knew the person, and his wife is a colleague of mine. So I'm aware of that work, and I think Rumi is a.
Unfortunately, I don't. I'm not an expert on that. I haven't had really time to look into it because I teach English literature. So
Prof, but it includes all
definitely
what has been commented. I mean, he is Shakespeare and Al-Farabi, and I mean, he's drawn on so many sources. It's just so immense that I'm sorry, I don't want to say any more. Okay, really.
I hope you will continue writing.
I don't fall into this framework because I feel writing is just writing, and I'm not so sure about deliberately writing like an Islamic.
That's how most writers feel.
Okay. Anyway, thank you.
Professor Faridah, there's a question from the YouTube from Sally. She's asking two questions. How do we define what is Islamic literature? And the question, how do we define? How do we define Islamic literature? And how do we define Islamic literature? And can we include the works by Christian writers like C.S. Lewis, inserting their ideas about Christian concepts? Is it acceptable in Islamic literature?
I think there is a difference between Islamic literature, as I've argued just now, bringing in what those scholars said, both from Malaysia and from others, what Islamic literature is. Farabi said it has to be Quranic. Islamic literature has to be Quranic literature, right? So literature done by others, there is a difference. I think one is also the importance of, which I didn't address, the importance of reading as an Islamic critic. And this is like any text goes. And we do this in our department. As I said, when we read Robert Browning, 18th century British poet, using Ibn Sina, and the philosophy, looking at the philosophy of both, how he looks at concept of God, concept of mankind, concept of free will, how he looked at it, and how Ibn Sina, which was, Ibn Sina is very happening in the West, even today. United Nations has his name in UNESCO as an educator and his thoughts on education. So people read Ibn Sina in the West, and it's not wrong to have comparative studies. As I said, it's enriching. So I'm not limiting any other texts written by non-Muslims. You can still read them, but you read as a critic with Islamic understanding, then it will be enriching. Because at the end of the day, you ask yourself, why do you read a book? What purpose? Is it just for leisure? It shouldn't be just for leisure. It should be transforming yourself, right? Hope that answers the question.
Yeah. So the question is that it is, as you said, is it acceptable? But we should know what is the purpose for accepting that.
Yeah.
Okay, we have gone over time, or nearly finishing the time. Thank you, Professor Faridah, and now I call upon Professor Abdulaziz Bargood to say a few words at the end of this session. Professor Abdulaziz. Professor Abdulaziz.
Yeah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Salam.
Yeah, thank you, Prof. Imtiaz, we would like to thank our Professor Faridah for this very enlightening and informative lecture. I think she has opened a good area for studies, especially here in Istac. And I think our postgraduate student can look at some of the areas and the issues that she has discussed, and we can move from here. I think this is really something good and adding a value. I'd like to thank also all the participants here. I think Prof. Tamim, our former dean, is also around. He was around here, I think. And I congratulate Dr. Imtiaz for all these good lectures and efforts, and may God bless you all. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam. Thank you very much. Yeah, with this we come to the end of today's lecture series, and hopefully we'll see you again next month for lecture number 9. So jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you, Professor Faridah.
Waalaikumsalam. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you.